everyone. It's Tony Caldwell, and welcome to another episode of Uncaptive Agent, where we're looking at the things that are challenging and opportunities for the independent agency in the insurance distribution industry. And today I have as my guest, Craig Poulton. Craig is in the flood insurance business. He's an independent insurance agent and has the distinction of running a really fast-growing company. In fact, I believe his company has been named to the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing businesses in the country 5 times, which might be a record. And so we're going to visit today with Craig about challenges for the independent agency system going forward. But Craig, I have some questions I'd love to get into with you about how do you create and sustain a business that has high growth over time. I think that's a question that lots of our listeners would like to have some insight on. So, Craig, welcome. Thanks for being with me.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having me on your program. I think that's a really interesting place to start. I kind of have had two careers in the insurance world. One was as a commercial producer, a boutique kind of an operation. And in that iteration of my life, got to know one particular individual who held some cover notes at Lloyd's and was looking to express those on the internet. This would be in the very early 2000s. And we had been selected by Microsoft as an independent content provider a few years before that on MSN. And then we had determined that Microsoft was probably just using us to do software development and wasn't looking at us as a long-term opportunity. So we jumped from that opportunity. He knew about that. So he called me and said, "You've done some software development. Would you like to put this program I've got at Lloyd's on the web?" And I said, be happy to, but we'd need a pretty long-term exclusive agreement in order to invest that kind of effort in it. And essentially, as we negotiated, he just basically said, "Well, look, how does unlimited sound? We'll just, you're the only one who can do this on the web." So we took that, and with that as a beginning, we had an earthquake, flood, and landslide combination product that was sort of earthquake centric, and we early in our putting this on the web, we realized that there was a subset of folks that were buying it for the flood, and so we did more research on that and discovered that we thought that the generally accepted wisdom of the day that the NFIP sold flood insurance at a loss, so why would anyone want to go there, was actually incorrect on again a subset of NFIP buyers. We started working on a way to determine how to define that subset, and make a long story short, we became a wholesaler and a program manager and a cover note holder at Lloyd's. We hired the individual that had held the cover notes, and we started selling a flood-centric product against the NFIP. We were the first ones I know of that actually were able to convince underwriters, in this case, underwriters at Lloyd's, that there was an opportunity in flood insurance and it wouldn't be suicidal to compete against the NFIP. And that concept was proven right over time because we used a much more granular underwriting technology than the NFIP was using. And therefore, we were able to better predict who would or wouldn't experience a loss than the NFIP was and how severe that loss might be. So as we demonstrated that over the years, we became the largest private market wholesale opportunity alternative, if you will, to the NFIP for flood zone risk, special flood hazard areas, as they're called,
Okay.
for folks who are recognized by the NFIP as being in a special flood hazard area. And that's been the genesis of our, for the most part, of our rapid growth. We still write quake, quite a bit of that, but flood has been the growth engine as we have been able to effectively cherry pick the NFIP to some extent, at least.
Okay. Well, to start with, I think I misstated actually your track record with the Inc. 5000. It's 6 years, not 5.
Yeah, I you know, it's fine.
Getting to be so commonplace for you, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's pretty exciting stuff when you can be on there 6 times.
But what does that mean? I mean, give me a sense of what compound annual growth looks like for your company over that period to be on that.
Well, yeah, on average, we've experienced pretty consistently over 20%, which means you double every 3 years, and we've pretty consistently exceeded that, sometimes quite dramatically.
Okay.
The NFIP has tried to impede the private market, whether purposefully or accidentally. Their actions have had the effect of impeding the private market. So we would have grown faster than that if the government monopoly wasn't sort of trying to maintain its position, again, purposefully or not purposely.
So our company, which has been in business about 21 years, is just under 35% CAGR, compound annual growth, over the 21-year period. And it's interesting because I talk to a lot of people about growth, and managing rapid growth in a short period of time is a set of challenges that is unique, and you'd love to have that. Managing high growth, as you have, and to some degree we have, over a longer period of time, is a totally different set of challenges. And you've been doing both really now for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years. It's a long period of time, but also a condensed period of time. What do you think are the 2 or 3 most important challenges to meet and outperform in terms of managing a business in that kind of environment?
Well, without question, the first one is people. The human resource aspect of it is a really serious challenge, because you have the competing imperatives of getting great people, but when you need them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the window of when you need them is, fairly small. In addition, narrowing that question down into our space, the insurance, I'm just gonna kind of narrow it down to insurance wholesale for a minute. You have some significant challenges when you find, again, going back to people, if you find the right person, very often they don't have the right background. And if you find the right background, very often it's not the right person. And so that's always a difficulty. So you have to find either someone who's got enough of the right background that you can bring them on and they don't start from scratch, or someone who is so good, so bright, that they can pick the insurance world up quickly.
Okay.
And so those are 2 of the big ones. Maybe the third one, or second or third one, would be finding providers, that is supporters, partners, counterparties, however you want to express that have the capital that needs to be employed, and helping them understand that if they trust you with that capital, you won't abuse that, and also finding the right partners who aren't going to try and pump and dump your product.
Okay.
So that's another really big one. And for us, frankly, it's been trying to get the government to play fair with private enterprise.
Okay. Well, and that's that third one is one that may not necessarily be something that our audience today is concerned with. Although we are in a heavily regulated environment, it's fairly stable for insurance distributors by and large. But the other two things, it strikes me, and as I was listening to you, I'm thinking about I'm involved in a community bank, and we're rapidly growing, and we have exactly those same problems that you've had in your business, and certainly we've experienced in ours, which are people and capital. It's just a question of degree, right? And it seems that the thing that I've learned out of a couple of experiences like that, I'm sure you would agree, that really from a leadership perspective, the key thing there is vision, to know you're going to need the people and the capital, and to be working way ahead of where you are today.
Very true. Strategy and tactics, I call it. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Tactics are shorter range, strategy longer range.
I remember going to the Porsche driving school years ago, and they told us, why do you hit a telephone, Paul, when they're 150 feet apart on a lonely, deserted road when you lose control of your car? And it's because your hands take you where your eyes are looking. And so even though there's nothing out there, you still hit the phone pole, because as soon as you start losing control of the car, you look at the phone pole and then you drive yourself into it. And so they teach you on the racetrack not to look at the cars in front of you, even though you're 130 miles an hour and they're 5 feet in front, right? You have to be looking at where you're going into the future. And so you're looking a quarter to half mile down the track all the time. And I think that's a great example of business, right? But I think business leaders like yourself, who are able to sustain rapid growth, have mastered the skill of looking way past your current environment. Would you agree?
I would thoroughly agree with that. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, coming as an independent insurance agent into this larger opportunity and managing it through that growth, what are the things that you used or that you did to teach yourself that skill, or to remind yourself that it was important?
Yeah. Well, one thing is, this is sort of opinion, but I'm not sure I was able to teach myself the skill of managing for the long term, taking a long-term view. I kind of have always done that. Maybe I learned that early in my career, because it is necessary for any business if you're running the business. Look at least 5 to 10 years out and try and see if you can ascertain what your world will look like at that point in time. I found that I wasn't great at that from the standpoint of being right about what 10 years out would look like. I got a little better at 5 years out, and I was pretty good at 1 to 2 years out. And so to use your analogy of the driving schools, years ago, I had the opportunity to do the Richard Petty driving experience, as they called it.
Uh-huh.
And in that one, unlike the Porsche, and for liability purposes, I'm sure, they would have actual NASCAR drivers pace you. So you'd be allowed to come onto the track, and if you stayed three car lengths behind that driver, the more consistent you were at staying three car lengths behind the professional, the faster he would go. And the faster he would go, the higher your ranking would be at the end of the day. It was pretty much a full day, and there were probably 10 people experiencing that day. And it was a fascinating exercise because you want to have people learn to do it your way, the way your organization is doing it, because you think that's the better way. For our organization, that's all about technology and the use of technology and how we use it. And so they're focusing on that 3 car lengths, and you're the driver, you're that professional driver. That professional driver has to really be looking out there into the distance and making sure that there's not a flying tire that needs to be avoided or something.
Right.
So there's a lot riding on your ability to discern the future. And what I've discovered is that the one thing I can be fairly certain of is I won't get the 10-year time frame right, but I have to steer toward it. I can't ignore it, and my idea of what it's going to be. But if I had steered our organization toward what I thought the future would look like in 15 years, starting 15 years ago, I would have been totally wrong.
Yeah. Well, so that's really interesting because I think what your story implies is that you have to make change in real time, and you have to be willing to do that. You have an idea about what is going to happen, but things get in the way of that, and you have to adapt quickly.
Exactly.
I was going to say, like you, we had a pace driver who was a professional driver, and I remember, in fact, pulling into the pits, and that guy said to me, who was had won Sebring and Le Mans. I mean, he's really, really good. A driver, telling me that the reason I was falling behind was that I wasn't braking hard enough. And that was an interesting idea that, okay, on the racetrack, braking is actually more important than acceleration. But it's also the pivoting in real time to keep up. And so we went back out and he showed me how to do that. And he also showed me something else that I think applies to our discussion here, which is that he was using 100% of the track, including the bumpers on the side, that I was staying away from. And so I think in business, we fail sometimes to use 100% of the opportunities in front of us, or 100% of the tools we have, because to your point, we're not recognizing that we have a really smart person who brings a skill set that maybe is different than what we've had before, or perhaps some new opportunities coming, and we're going so fast we're going to speed right by it because you didn't brake hard enough to see it and take a different direction. So you've applied, I guess, all of those things in your business career. And the question I'd like to ask is, as you look at the future, and you have, 7,000, 8,000 independent agent, clients or people who place business with you, what do you think they're missing about the next 5 or so years in that industry, in the independent agency industry? What are they missing? What are they speeding past?
That's a really good question. And we've got about 10,000 now who are counterparties, trading partners.
Mostly underestimating you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. But they're a pretty sharp group for the most part. I would say one of the things that may be somewhat missed is the opportunity to deliver their message on a highly targeted basis locally. Because one of the strengths of, whether it's an independent agent or a captive agent, one of the strengths of an insurance consultant, as opposed to an 800 number and an insurance customer service representative, even a knowledgeable one, is the knowledge of the local dynamics. So in our case, one of the things we do to add value for insurance producers who don't know a lot about the NFIP and its rather arcane rules and terminology is we make it simpler.
Okay.
And so because it's simple, a lot of producers who don't have enough flood business to try and educate all of their people in their office about how to do flood, or to create a champion for flood, or those sorts of things. They look at our website, catcoverage.com, and they find that they can take anybody that's rudimentarily trained in insurance, point them to the website, and they can create a flood insurance policy that they know is actually, from a coverage standpoint, better than the NFIP, and from a pricing standpoint, hopefully as good as or better than the NFIP. And if it's not, they don't have to buy it there, but they can get that quote, they can offer that coverage easily and know that it's been done properly and that they haven't missed something. Whereas with the NFIP, there's always this worry that they may have missed something that'll come back to bite the client. So that's been a big thing for us. But when you express that locally, and my point is that an understanding of your weather patterns, your crime patterns, your location, the changes in wind at the mouth of a canyon, for example, an independent agent can add value by saying, we want to make sure your windstorm coverage is exactly right, and this is the better form, this is the better company for that, you'll pay a little more, etc. But that customized advice is so crucial, but being able to offer it to a subset that is in your geographic bailiwick is one of the things I think that gets ignored by producers.
So simplification, but simplification, I'm going to parse you a little bit. I heard simplification with mastery. And I think that many agents have simplified, okay? They rate, quote, sell on price. This is a commodity, and the price is the only thing that matters. And they're a little bit of a freak because it's like a one-armed power lifter. He's got a huge body on one side, he's missing on the other. Your conversation reminded me of a fabulous conversation I had with my next door neighbor, who's a 14th generation winemaker. And he's explaining, this complicated, convoluted subject that everybody's mystified by, like, okay, how do you make a great wine? Yeah. And he essentially says, you make what the grapes give you. Okay, well, that's simple. But what's not simple are the 3,000 variables that go into that, right?
Yeah.
But we understand that. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that agents need to come from a position of great expertise, but simplifying what's really complex and complicated for the average consumer, but in a way that magnifies their own mastery.
I think I think you got it. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And whether you do that with a direct mail piece that quotes some of your clients, which I think they miss that a lot, getting some quotes from clients who have recognized the value and have benefited from the mastery of the insurance subject exhibited by the producer and staff. Those sorts of, the messaging is super important as well. Just saying we're here and we're an all lines insurance agency, that won't get you very far. You've got to it's not just about a call to action, call us for we'll beat the competition's price. That's one way to do it. And, GEICO does really well at that, and it appeals to a segment of our market. But that's not where the independent agent and even a captive agent who understands the market and so forth, where producers are going to shine is when they demonstrate that your call to action is get a hold of me and let me make let me make sure you're covered properly. And let me make sure that you're getting the best value as opposed to price.
Well, as I look out there, that means, this conversation means that a lot of agencies are in pretty good shape because this is what they've been doing for a long time. But those who have allowed themselves to become the common denominator salespeople, which is they've got a real problem into the future. But to pivot just for a second, back to the weather, which dominates the whole business, right? But it particularly dominates yours. And over the next 5 years, it's going to be increasingly fluid and frustrating for everybody because it's changing. I've been reading articles in the last month or so that say, hey, these atmospheric rivers that are giving you these bomb blasts of water on top of droughts, that's going to get more and more pronounced. And so it occurs to me that there are going to be areas that have never flooded before, that are not on the 500-year flood maps, or that all of a sudden are going to get flooded, and that this is both an opportunity but also a risk for agents not to recognize. So if you recognize it, you should be selling flood insurance at probably fairly low rates to people who are scratching their heads going, I'm in the middle of a drought, why would I do that? But that's again about expertise and forward thinking. And so I'm sure you've thought about that. So how do you see the landscape and opportunity for agents specifically with your product changing over the next few years?
Well, I'm going to bifurcate the subject into two groups. One is the special flood hazard area group, and now I'm talking about clients, and the other one is the non-special flood hazard area group.
Okay.
And there's really a third group, the not in a special flood hazard area but should be group.
Okay.
So the NFIP has created the flood zones that we're so familiar with. They are 100-year flood zones. And what that means is there's a lot of people in a 100-year flood zone who are probably in a 10-year flood zone. They're going to get flooded on average once every 10 years, just putting it sort of mildly. And so you've got a tremendous variance of who's going to experience a flood when. And you've got a lot of people who think they're fine because the NFIP didn't include them in the flood zone, mostly at the insistence of the local government authority, which wants as few homes in their municipality to have to pay for flood insurance as possible. The easiest way to make sure they don't have to pay for flood insurance is to have them determined as not being in the flood zone when they really are. And that's a disservice that a lot of people are enjoying from their local government and from the NFIP, this pretending that they're not in a special flood hazard area. So I would expect that a producer who is looking down the road, as you've described, and rain events will become more frequent and more severe in our estimation. That won't mean that in any given 5-year period, it may feel like they've decreased. We're talking about a lot longer than a 20-year time frame, because Mother Nature can take a 5-year pause and it's like nothing. So the producer who is in a location where there's very little in the way of special flood hazard area risk should, as you've indicated, be selling a very low cost flood insurance product that can be tacked onto the homeowner's policy. We have that on our website right now. If there's very little risk, we have products that provide low premium, and the producer can sell that to an insured and know that they've done their job and avoid an E&O claim in the future. We also have the ability to help the agent educate the person who should be in a special flood hazard area horizontally, but who is vertically in a flood zone, to educate them on the fact that, you don't have to buy flood insurance, but you really should buy flood insurance, even though it seems expensive. Your flood risk is significant according to the experts who, I've accessed through catcovers.com or wherever one might choose to go. That is a crucial thing, because it's so easy to misinform the insured and agree with them when they say, I'm I'm not in the flood zone, so I'm not going to buy flood insurance. You really need to have an intelligent conversation with them at that point. And then there's the special flood hazard area folks, and you just have to offer them the product or they'll buy it somewhere else. So that's a good reason to do it. If they have a mortgage. If they don't have a mortgage, they very often will go without flood insurance because their producer has not helped them understand the risk well enough. But that is something that producers are going to be faced with more and more, as you've intoned. The future is going to be filled with events where, as with Hurricane Ida, went right up through the middle of the US, clear to the East Coast, and caused billions and billions of dollars worth of damage in the process. It was a pure rain event. And that wasn't even a atmospheric river. That was just the remnants of a good, strong hurricane that was really able to suck water up and deliver it inland. So it's going to be more and more on producers' radar to have the flood discussion as one of the check boxes on their coverage.
Well, it seems to me it's an enormous opportunity because, first place, it's another policy that you're selling, which raises your retention, which is the biggest overlooked opportunity to generate income over time for an agency.
Yep.
Retention. And to your point, you're showing mastery and all those other things which make you unique to the person, as compared to Geico. And then the risk of not doing it is pretty significant. I mean, the last fall in Napa Valley, which is in a massive long-term historical drought, 40% of the valley has burned in the last 4 or 5 years. They've gotten 50% of their 30-year average rainfall for 5 years in a row. So it's a really desperate thing. And they had a atmospheric bomb cyclone thing go off, 8 or 9 inches of rain in 6 hours, washed out roads, flooded. And so, I'd be willing to bet that almost no one in Napa Valley has flood insurance. So what a huge opportunity. And so those kind of, that's just one example, right? There's hundreds or thousands of locales around the United States just like that, with just exactly that risk you're talking about. What I heard everybody needs flood insurance. But they pay for it is really
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
that is true.
So anyway, that if we haven't done anything else, we've established that there's an opportunity for agents.
Absolutely.
So, this has been an interesting conversation. I think that, there are a lot of people headed for the exits in our business over the next 5 to 10 years just because of age. And we have a talent crisis of bringing the new people in. Those, though, that are planning to stick around are trying to figure it out. And so I hope they've learned something today, which is, okay, capital and people. Those are the two big ones. You gotta be looking out in front of you, or you'll always be behind hitting things. And you got to pivot in real time. Is there anything else that you would want to share that you are concerned about for our industry, or see as an opportunity that might get missed from just business as usual?
Well, the only thing that probably comes to mind in that vein is an observation generally that America has experienced in my opinion, a degradation in its general integrity factor. And so I think if a producer will discipline themselves to not be the one who tells a story they don't believe, or sells a coverage that really shouldn't have been sold, or at a price that could have been better that they knew of somewhere else, whatever the decision may be, stay true to the idea that if you are a person of integrity and you consistently perform with a really honest effort to see that your trading partners as well as your clients are well served by you, and that you tell them the truth, you'll do better in the long run. Now, that's a personal opinion. I know a lot of insurance, there's the old saying in our business, the last liar in wins. and I've seen a lot of that in my day, but I'm convinced that if you're in it for the long term, maintaining your integrity is worth any price you might get for your integrity. There's a story of a gentleman I heard once where he was out in the desert of Nevada. He bought a soda pop at a gas station, and the change machine gave him like 10 cents more than he was supposed to get back. This is back in the days when you weren't using credit cards. And he drove back 15 miles to give the dime back to the gas station owner. And the gas station owner looked at him like he was crazy and said, "You did not need to do that. That was sort of a bad decision." And he said, "My integrity is worth more, a lot more than 10 cents. And, got in his car and drove off. So I would just hope that as an industry, we can exhibit a high degree of integrity and not let ourselves roll downhill to a lowest common denominator integrity factor.
That is really powerful, and I do think that is a challenge for many people. Particularly as they are beginning a business. It's easier in a sense to have integrity when you are sitting on a pile of cash, right?
True. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
But in one of the things that's been terrific about our business in the last 15, 20 years is we have a lot of people entering, creating new businesses and stuff like that. And I think that's going to continue. We're going to see a lot of people moving from the direct writing channel into the independent agency channel. That continues to accelerate over time. But they're faced with the problem of, okay, I got to eat. How am I going to eat? Sell something to eat. And so I think that is a really serious challenge, and one that you've given the very best possible advice for. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
So, Craig, thank you for joining me today. I've enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that we'll have an opportunity to meet in person sometime.
That'd be wonderful. I hope so too. Thanks for having me on your program. I enjoyed it. Those were great questions and a great discussion.
Thanks. I'm talking to independent agency owners about this all the time. If you'd like to have a more personalized conversation, click on the button or the link in the description and we'll make that happen. You can also reach out to me at tonycaldwell.net/contact.